So, Tom Hickman, glad to have you with us today.
Thanks, Dave.
The city of Bend is proposing a major improvement to their municipal water supply system, namely the Bridge Creek watershed. Now, the price tag on this is quite large. It's about $68 million if you include the hydropower component.
That's correct.
So, explain first of all what the proposal is. Kind of thumbnail sketch it, and then we'll look at your slides.
So overall, what the project entails is really four separate components to the project. One of those components being an optional component that the council has elected to proceed with. What those components are is a membrane treatment plant to comply with the surface water enhanced drinking water rules, otherwise known as LT2. And that's a federal rule that we have to treat for cryptosporidium. And then the other component of the project is to replace the pipeline, which is approximately 9 miles long. These pipelines that are currently there, one was installed in the 1920s and the other one was installed in the early 1950s. So both of those are showing serious signs of stress. And then a third component is the rebuild of our intake structure up at Bridge Creek. And then the optional component is the hydroelectric facility.
Can these be staged in? Can you do one and not the other?
You certainly, we've looked at a lot of options along those ways. Mm-hmm. The stuff that really isn't optional is the treatment component. These rules came out, we knew of these rules coming out back in 1994.
Okay.
And so they've been in the works for quite some time. We certainly knew we were going to need to comply with these rules by 2000. And so, we've known about the treatment rule for some time. The pipelines, because of the issues we're seeing there, and the fact that we have a 1980 study and water master plan that was done in 1980, it identified those pipes as being in some critical condition and needing to be replaced back then. So we were really living on borrowed time on those two pipes, and those two pipes supply about 50% of the city's water supply. So we're a little nervous about losing those lines. So those are the parts of the project that I would say they're the non-optional components. The intake structure that was built in the 1920s and at some point will need to be upgraded. If we do the hydroelectric component of the project as council has approved, we absolutely have to rebuild that because we have to modify it to comply with some of the federal energy regulation requirements.
So if you do all of it and $68 million is a price tag, what's that going to do to the water rates? That's going to push them up substantially.
It will definitely increase water rates. There's no way to get around that. In order to pay for this project, it's part of the operations and maintenance component of running a water system. Mm-hmm. We've been fortunate that we've had this system in place for a very long time, which for many years actually kept our rates down. We actually started rate increases a couple years ago to start paying for this project. We're looking at about another 4 years of increases before we see it really stabilize and then basically taper down in terms of what's going to be required to pay for this project.
So what are the projected increases? Let's take the baseline of the water rate right now. How much more is it going to increase? Are they going to double, triple?
Well, it's going to increase about anywhere from, right now the estimates are from 7 to 10% a year for the next 4 years. So if you wanted to look at it in cumulative effect, it could be as much as 40% rate increase over the next 4 years.
As compared to the current rates they're paying now?
Correct, yes.
What would the price, so $68 million is the total cost. If you'd look at just what is required, for example, the filtration for cryptosporidium, and just what is mandated, what would the price be on that?
We looked at that, and actually the bare bones component of the project is about $63 million. Keep in mind, these are estimates that they're the most recent estimates we have based on 30% design. So we'll have another update on that estimate at 60%. We have received some bids on some components of the project already, and those bids have come in significantly lower than what we had estimated. So obviously we hope that trend continues and that we end up with a project that will be less. But to answer your fundamental question is the optional components of the project total somewhere between $5 and $6 million.
A lot of the public works projects that have been coming in now have been coming in substantially under what was projected because contractors are so hungry for work. They're really sharpening their pencil, and they just want to keep their guys working and have some kind of money coming in. What kind of savings are we looking at? Substantial savings? And balance that with the fact that some of the supplies are probably increasing in price, like steel pipe, and we'll address that in just a minute.
Yeah. Certainly right now, from the perspective of trying to get a good deal in terms of constructing the project, the market's good right now. Because contractors are very hungry, they're trying to keep their folks employed and keeping their doors open.
Right.
This project actually is estimated to generate somewhere around 200 jobs for approximately 2 years. So there's a lot of interest in this project from the construction market perspective.
Okay. What about the cost of the materials like steel pipe? I know the city was proposed, and I believe they accepted a proposal to buy some pipe now ahead of the project because the pipe prices were projected to increase.
Correct. So we've actually been watching the steel market for the last few years, and the steel market really bottomed out somewhere around 2009, July of 2009. It's pretty much been on the increase since that point. But there was a recent dip in the market that was rather significant, and we were able to take advantage of that. But what really surprised us in that bid was, while we got a good deal on the steel, what we didn't anticipate was the savings that we got in the labor component of that. So in other words, the cost of the labor cost of manufacturing that pipe. The total savings there, from what our estimate was, came in $2.3 million under what we had estimated. So that was great news, and the actual steel component of that total bid was about 1/3 of the cost.
Where are we right now in project planning, implementation? Where's the city council and giving you the go-ahead? If you could kind of tell us where we are in this project.
Sure. Well, the council actually, back in 2009, they actually approved us moving forward with the reinvestment of the surface water supply back in 2009. And since then, they asked us to look at everything a little closer, and we've done that. And they recently, a year ago, made the decision to proceed with the project. And gave us final direction to proceed with design. And so we've gone through what we call preliminary design. We first went through a feasibility study, then we went through preliminary design, we went through a value engineering process, and we're now approaching 60% design on the project. So once we get 60% design, we will actually be in a situation where our contractor will be providing us and our council what we call a GMP, or guaranteed maximum price. So we will know the cap of the cost on this project, as long as the city does not elect to make any additional changes to the project, which we don't anticipate. That will cap the price. And then, of course, as the bids come in to actually do the work, if there's savings there, the city gets to take advantage of those savings. So we'll know what the cap is. We won't know what the bottom end is until we get all the other bids.
Does the 60% design where we are right now, does that include the hydropower component? And how much of the design cost has been designing hydropower, and where are we in the hydropower component?
We're approximately 60% designed with the hydro component as well.
Included.
Included
Okay.
In the engineering. The engineering fees on this, it always surprises people how much it costs to engineer these projects. They're not cheap to engineer. There's a lot of design elements that go into this, and it takes a lot of expertise and time to get these done. But right now, the cost of the hydro facility was approximately $1 million just for the design element. But that's included in that total price of $5 to $6 million for the entire hydro unit.
Now, one of the paybacks of the hydropower unit is it's the one component of this whole project which will generate revenue for the city.
Correct.
Long term.
Correct.
And it's difficult to really predict that, isn't it? Because we really don't know what the energy power rates are going to be.
It is difficult. We do. We've looked at what the people in the industry use for projecting energy costs, electrical energy, and those are projected to increase. We took a pretty conservative approach in what we think those increases will be. And much to our surprise, we thought the first many years it actually wouldn't be generating revenue. You would be paying off your
debt.
Bonds.
Yeah.
And what we found out is actually in year one of the project, you're actually generating revenue.
Year one.
In year one, we generate, even after you pay your debt, your loan debt in year one, we're still anticipated on a conservative estimate to generate about $125,000 at year one. Of course, that increases over time as energy prices rise, and it increases over time as you pay off that debt. And once the debt is paid off, in 20 years, the estimated revenue is, I believe, somewhere around $1.5 million a year.
Does the city get any additional incentives or benefits by the fact that this is green energy, favoring anything? Is there any payback from a state or federal level because the city is actually producing green power?
There was a point, and when we began this project in the feasibility level of this project, we actually had a number of components of what we call green energy credits. There were federal programs, state programs, and even private programs that could have been used to offset the cost of the project as a whole.
Right.
As the economy worsened through 2007, 2008, and we were in that study, it was shortly after that, in sometime in 2009, when we pretty much saw all of those programs go away. The federal programs went away, the state programs went away, and then even the private programs went away. Those are anticipated to return someday. Unfortunately, the federal and state components of that will be after we've constructed, so we won't be able to take advantage of those like we had originally hoped. But what we will see return is what they refer to as green tags, and those are what private companies actually they give money to somebody who's producing what's called green energy to offset their own energy requirements in terms of green energy that they may need to offset. And that market fluctuates a great deal, but it's been fairly high in the past, and we anticipate at some point that's going to return and will increase revenues even beyond what we've projected.
How close are we to actually turning dirt on this?
If everything goes correctly, we're right now looking at sometime next summer, in the June period, when we anticipate to start actually the actual movement of earth and start putting pipe in the ground and a lot of the other components at the same time.
And so are you going to be working on the intake structure? What exactly are you going to be doing?
With the various phases of the project, we'll likely start with the pipeline and Skyliners Road. As you may know, Skyliners Road is also slated to be rebuilt without this project, and our goal is to get our pipe under that roadway before they reconstruct it.
So you don't have to tear up a new road.
Exactly. So they're anticipated to go to rebuilding that road in 2013. So we're going to try to get the pipe in that ground in 2012 underneath that roadway. So that'll be the first main effort. But there'll be other components that will go on at the same time, and that will be the treatment facility and the hydro facility. Those will be constructed during pretty much at the same time, some late June to next fall.
If you have any questions for Tom, you can call us live now at 541-323-2882. 541-323-2882 is the number here. And Tom, you've got a slide presentation.
I do.
On just showing us the condition of the pipe. Sometimes
Yes.
a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we can kind of take a look at pictorially what we've got going on here.
Yeah. So this picture behind me here, this is actually a picture of one of the springs that feeds our surface water system. There's a pretty significant spring complex that flows into Bridge Creek. This is one of the larger springs, and this is not a river. This is actually coming straight out of the ground. It's a beautiful place. Right above this water you see here, it's actually dry ground, and so it literally comes just erupting out of the earth. And this particular part of the spring complex is about 3/4 of a mile wide, and there's dozens and dozens of springs of various sizes that come out of the ground just like that, and come down to they come down into Bridge Creek, flow down Bridge Creek, which is an absolutely beautiful creek if you've never hiked it, and then at the bottom of Bridge Creek is where we take our water out.
So how do you have these springs that are just erupting from the ground here?
Yes.
And how many of those are there?
Dozens and dozens and dozens.
Wow.
Yeah. So
interesting aquifer up there, isn't it?
It's really amazing. It's all spring fed
Right.
up there, and so we actually these are incredibly stable. They do not fluctuate much. Even through drought years, they've been very stable, and in large part that's because of the geology that's up there. You have a lot of fractured basalt, so the snow melt, the rain melt goes into that fractured basalt and is a reservoir that literally spills out of the ground.
And the ground actually acts as a huge filter to filter out.
That's correct. Yes,
Contaminants and so on and so
it
forth.
does. Yes.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the issues we're dealing with the project here. The first one that it really we didn't find out till we were fairly far into this project. We weren't aware of the fire risk that our watershed had. And John Allen, who's the current forest supervisor, this is a quote from him that there's really not a question about if it will burn, it's a matter of when. To give you an idea here, if you look at this picture, the orange on that picture is beetle kill area. All the orange you see in here, that's all beetle kill or standing dead timber. Our watershed up in here, you can see it's estimated somewhere around 40% of our watershed has a significant amount of standing dead timber and a lot of fuels, high fuel area. And in particular, what makes this a very significant challenge for the Forest Service is this is a roadless area. There are no roads in this area at all, so getting access to deal with a fire is very difficult for the Forest Service to even get in there. Second, just the topography of this whole area slopes down, and the predominant winds, of course, are from west to east. So the concern is if you get a fire starting in here, it will run rapidly downhill. So interesting here, you can see this white area here. This is the Bridge Creek fire that occurred in 1979.
Okay, and 2 years ago we had another fire that, if it would have taken another turn, may have gotten into this watershed.
Got very close, just outside the boundary out here, about 2 miles from our watershed. Is where that fire got to before they were able. Well, what happened actually is the winds changed direction. Instead of driving from the north to the south, they actually turned around, which pushed the fire back on itself and really was able to get it under control. So we were pretty nervous watching that fire. We actually did have a fire this summer that from a lightning strike that occurred right on the boundary of our watershed at the lower end here. But the Forest Service was able to get on top of that before it actually really started going and got it under control quickly. But fortunately, they were able to catch it. So it's something we're watching very closely and we're very concerned about, because once a fire occurs, the degradation to our water is going to be rather significant, as it was in the Bridge Creek fire in 1979.
So every fire year, you're kind of holding your breath, aren't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, very concerned about it. So another issue here is our pipelines, and some of this might be a little more of a challenge to see here, but these black pieces here that you can see sitting on the edge of this inlet pipe to our tank, this is actually taken from standing inside one of our tanks where these lines come down and feed. These pieces are actually the wall of the interior of the pipe, and it's literally being ripped apart on the interior of the pipe, and these pieces come down and they pile up in the bottom of our tank. And that's a significant concern, to start seeing the actual structural elements of the pipe being torn apart and showing up in our tank.
So what is this pipe made of? Is that metal?
Yeah, this part of the pipe is actually steel, okay. and the actual pipe coming down is made of steel, but they put a lining on the interior to protect it from corrosion over time.
Right.
And what you see here is that's that material, is that the stuff that's supposed to protect it from corrosion.
So the lining is literally being washed away.
Yes, and significant amounts. Every year when the guys go in, our crews go in to clean these tanks, they're finding more and more of this material.
When they go in to clean the municipal water supply storage tanks, the big storage tanks, they're finding collections of this lining that's being washed out of the pipe being deposited in your storage tanks.
Yep. The other issue here, and this one's a little more of a challenge to see, is we drew some white lines here, but you can barely see some black material right through here, and this black material, that's actually our pipe. That is actually the 1926 pipe that went in the ground, and so the first concern is that it's exposed to the elements. So that's one of the concerns. But the bigger concern we have is, you can see this boulder right here. If you've ever been up to Tumalo Falls, there's a rather significant rock bluff as you drive up to Tumalo Falls on the right-hand side. This rock broke away from that bluff, came tumbling down, and you can see the point of that rock stopped just inches short of our pipe. Had it rolled just a little further, it would have crushed this pipe. Our concern with that event isn't necessarily that it would have crushed and broken that pipe. The next thing that occurs as a result of that is what we call line collapse or a vacuum. And this actually happened in Sacramento, California. What happens is that the energy of the water that's in that pipe continues to move, but a vacuum, because you get a column separation in that water, the vacuum that forms behind that water is very significant, and it actually sucks the pipe in. It literally collapses that pipe, and it can run for many miles. And so the bigger concern, like in this event, you can see it ran from this valve that finally stopped it all the way up to the foot of this dam. In this case, in our case, it could potentially run for miles and before it would stop. And of course, an event like that would be absolutely catastrophic.
So it's almost like, it literally is almost like a big drinking straw that you kind of suck in.
That's correct.
And if you have so much vacuum inside the straw, it can collapse the straw. So essentially, this is a big straw.
That's absolutely correct.
And if the vacuum is strong enough, it will suck anything in.
That's correct. Yes.
That's significant.
It's very significant, and so it's one of our bigger concerns. And then we also have a number of other concerns, which I don't have pictures of, but we have a number of building structures that have encroached over the many years that have built on or near our pipes, which of course if they were to break, these pipes are under significant pressure. And of course 1920s technology, our ability to shut this water off, it's not quick. It takes a significant amount of time for us to shut the water down. So the amount of damage that could occur is quite significant in the event we actually have a line break.
That reminds me of a story that happened here in Bend where there was an underground water line near downtown. In the middle of the night it burst and caused damage to a home just because of the force of the water.
That's correct. And actually that was a very, very small event compared to what you could anticipate happening here.
Because of the pressure of the water and the force
correct.
of the water.
Yeah, the amount of energy that is being fed to the lines there is very significant.
At Bridge Creek.
Yes.
How long is the Bridge Creek pipe from the
intake down? It's about 9 miles, 8.5 to 9 miles total. So obviously the pipe is one of the other issues. So the third issue is really this rule, which is referred to as a long-term 2 or LT2 Enhanced Surface Water Treatment Rule. This rule was really based on an event that occurred in Milwaukee in 1993. There was a cryptosporidium outbreak in the Milwaukee water system, and that outbreak from their source water actually killed over 100 people.
In 1993?
In 1993. And thousands of people were made ill, seriously ill. So, in fact, from my understanding, there are still lawsuits going on today with the city of Milwaukee as a result of that event. That event really opened the eyes to the regulators for drinking water, and so in 1993 they began to look at the options for how to deal with cryptosporidium, developed a set of rules, and those rules were reviewed very critically, very thoroughly by thousands of scientists. It's been pretty intensively reviewed. And then certainly by 2000 we were aware that we were going to need to comply with this rule. In fact, prior to that we knew, just like the city of Portland, they actually began their efforts to comply with this rule back in 1998. The city of New York began their efforts back in 1996. Unfortunately, the city, for whatever reason, really didn't get on this issue until shortly after I arrived to work for the city back in 2005 is when we really began to look at what this rule meant to us and what we were going to need to do to comply with that rule.
So we're behind the 8 ball a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. The actual compliance deadline for us to meet this rule is October of 2012. We're not going to make that deadline. We've actually filed and received approval from the State Drinking Water Program, which enforces the EPA rules on this. They've approved a 2-year extension. So we have until October of 2014 now to be compliant with this rule.
What is cryptosporidium?
Cryptosporidium is a hard shell bug, essentially, that lives in water columns, and it actually comes from mammals, from the droppings of animals.
Deer, elk.
Yep, and it's fairly common in nature, and if you ingest it, it can reproduce in your system, and make you very, very ill. And unlike many other bugs that can be neutralized or killed by chlorine, which almost all water systems add to their water to deal with bugs, this particular bug actually, chlorine doesn't bother it. It thrives quite well in even chlorinated water. So that's why the only way to deal with this bug is to really deal with some type of treatment where you either physically remove it or a treatment process to neutralize it. And those are expensive to install.
So the city is looking at membrane filtration for a couple of reasons: to remove the debris from any watershed fire that should occur,
Yeah.
and also to deal with cryptosporidium.
Correct. So if I can here, I'm going to pull up a couple slides here that might be helpful. Apologize for having to run through these. If you recall, I'm just going to give an illustration here to folks so they can see what it looks like. That spring that I showed you, it feeds to a dam that we have about 4 miles upstream above our intake structure, and we capture that water, and we actually convey this water over the middle fork of Tumalo Creek.
Okay.
The reason why we did this, this particular structure was put in the 1950s. The reason why that was done, and they didn't take the Tumalo water, is because the Tumalo water actually has what they call glacial flour or glacial till in that. And although to the eye it looks crystal clear, it actually, there's quite a bit of turbidity and other things in that water that we didn't want in our drinking water. The spring water, on the other hand, has none of that. It's ultra clear and ultra pure, and so we capture that and we convey this water over to Bridge Creek, and then it flows down Bridge Creek, which is all spring fed and has no glacial till in it.
So you actually are piping spring water into Bridge Creek.
Correct, and Bridge Creek has its own spring flow, so so it makes sense to folks. In fact, if I can go back here, this is the water. This is our boundary of our watershed as a whole, and the spring complex, that photo you just saw, is up here. And the original in the 1920s, they weren't reliant on that. They actually were reliant on all of these spring complexes, because these are all springs.
So all these little black lines here are springs
Correct.
that feed Bridge Creek?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's what they originally depended on in the 1920s. And then once the city grew and we got into the 40s and later in the 40s, they realized this was no longer enough to meet the city's demand. And they went up and they got this additional spring source up here, which is quite large. And then they spill that over to Bridge Creek, and that's been running that way now since the 1950s. And then our intake is down here, where we put it in these two pipes. And again, when they added this complex up here, they actually added a second pipe at that time.
How much of Bridge Creek do you actually use for the city's supply? I know it varies depending on the year. Depending on time of year.
Exactly. It depends a great deal upon the time of year, and there's a number of factors that depend on how much water we take out of Bridge Creek. But on average, right now, on an annual average, it's probably around 7 million gallons a day. But you have to understand that a good portion of the year, 6 to 7 months of the year, during the winter months, the entire city's demand is about 6 to 7 million gallons a day. So that's really what keeps that number down. When we get into the summer months, that number rapidly rises, and by the time we get into July, August, September, that's when we see a demand spike that exceeds the amount of water we can take from this system, and we use wells to offset that. And we can talk more about that in a moment.
Sure.
About
why there are some people that are saying, instead of doing all this, let's just use well water.
Correct. So this is our intake structure. This was the structure built in the 1920s. If you've been up to Tumalo Falls in the parking lot is only a few hundred yards away from where this structure sits. And so the Bridge Creek actually comes downstream here and mixes with Tumalo Creek just downstream of Tumalo Falls. So we have this small dam structure here that was built in the 1920s that pulls the water up, backs the water up inside this structure, and then goes into the pipes which convey to town.
So the pipe intake is actually inside this building?
Correct, yes. Yeah. Let me get to. So actually, this is kind of an interesting thing that most people don't realize. Back in around 1918, the state, back then it wasn't called Department of Health, but the equivalent of that, actually declared the Deschutes River unfit for human consumption. And because the city was getting all of its water from the Deschutes River at that point in time out near Drake Park. And when it was declared unfit for human consumption, the city, our forefathers, they started looking at what their other options were. And they did a study, and they looked at a number of areas here to find a water supply. So it's kind of interesting. They looked at Fall River, Spring River, the Benham Falls Reservoir, and at that time was proposed to be the largest reservoir in the state, which never panned out. And they also looked up at Tumalo Creek, including Green Lakes. They actually looked at piping water from Green Lakes all the way down. And they settled upon the Bridge Creek Basin. And so just to show you here, there's been a lot of discussion about, have we studied this issue? Have we really looked at this closely? And what we're showing here is the 5 major studies that have been done in comparing looking at the alternatives of water sources. And the earliest was back in 1924 that I just went through. And that one, they looked at a number of sources, 7 sources. They ended up with Bridge Creek. But both in 1924 and in 1948, when it was evaluated again, groundwater was really not an option at that time because of our deep aquifer here. The technology just wasn't there to extract that water.
Back in 1948.
Correct. 1964, that technology started to come around, and so they evaluated it again. And what they suggested was stick with Bridge Creek. It's the preferred alternative. But to start meeting those summer peak demands, they suggested that the city explore groundwater development and to meet those summer peak demands. And then in 1980, it was evaluated again. And again, it said to reinvest. And at that time, that's when it said, it's kind of interesting. We always think we're stumbling upon something new, and only to find out somebody had looked at this a very long time ago. And back in 1980, one said your pipes are in pretty bad condition. You need to set aside a fund to pay for these pipes. In addition, they also said that hydropower would make a lot of sense to put on this. But they also
that was the Century West study back in 1980.
Correct. And so, but they also suggested you need to look at developing groundwater for an additional secondary supply to meet that summer peak demand. And so the city actually had already developed its first deep aquifer well back in about the early 1970s. So we started realizing, hey, we do have groundwater as a source. And then most recently, when we reevaluated everything again, we did look at whether or not to make that reinvestment, and the decision was made for a number of reasons to stick with the surface water project to make that reinvestment, but also to realize that we needed to use that groundwater to meet that summer peak demand, and as the population demand continues off into the future, that groundwater is definitely a component of our water supply that we can't ignore and we're going to need. So let me jump ahead here. So this is one of the questions that comes up a lot for us, Dave. That why did you guys end up here? There's really some basic principles in engineering when you're looking at a municipal water supply, and really these are I'll be the first to admit some probably gross simplifications of all of the technical factors. But really, the first and foremost thing you do when you're looking for a water supply, you try to find something that's the highest quality source water you can get. You want the purest water you can find. You also want the most protected water you can find. What the reason is because if you look back in time, since drinking water began, what's happened is that contaminants have entered that water, and regulations followed. And the cost of those regulations is quite expensive.
Right.
And so the higher quality water, the long-term opportunity to not have to deal with future regulations is better. The other thing you look at is to minimize your pumping costs, keep those pumping costs down. And of course, our surface water supply is a gravity-fed supply. That's a big benefit to our community versus lifting that water from the groundwater, which is anywhere from 500 to 800 feet below us. Lifting water is it's expensive to do. And then we look to what we call use conjunctive use. And what we mean by that, Dave, is it really is where you use the groundwater, and when you use that groundwater, you actually are lowering that groundwater table a bit. And so to help restore that, the idea would be that you are able to turn off those wells, give that groundwater a chance to recover, and then be able to have it there when your high demand returns. What we have is that ability with the two sources. So during the winter time, we're able to shut off our wells, let that groundwater table recover a bit, and then again, once we get back into summer demand, we turn those wells back on. And then lastly, the big issue here is the long-range demand projections. And this is one of those things that it's a very difficult thing to do, to look out 50 and 100 years of what a community is going to need. But when you consider the fact our last two water rights that the city obtained took us 16 years to obtain those two water rights and over $1 million in legal fees to obtain two water rights. And so if we don't think on these very long-term projections, you end up in a situation where you can't get the water, and you end up in a situation that's not good for not only us as citizens, but it's not good for the economy.
That brings to mind a recent story. There was, in fact, Congressman Walden was in Prineville talking to Facebook and some other data centers that are looking at Central Oregon.
Yes.
And surprisingly, water is one of their considerations. Power, the availability of power, and water, because they need water to cool the system. Now, you wouldn't think you'd need water to cool computer systems, but when you look at systems to the magnitude of a Facebook or a data center, cooling those huge numbers of computers is significant. And that's surprisingly one of the things that a data center is concerned about.
It's absolutely true. The water requirements for some of these businesses do vary. We've actually a couple times now had some businesses that are highly dependent on water, technology businesses. And the very first question they asked was not only, do you have adequate water supply? The second question was, what's the water quality? How good is it? And because it really impacts what they're going to need to do to manufacture the products that they make. So it is something that's, for some of the bigger technological companies that we'd like to attract as a community, they definitely look at. So I'm going to get to here, and this gets back to that, what we just talked about a little bit, Dave, is this whole issue of looking at different options. And when we did look at this, this is just a simple graphic, but you can see our Bridge Creek intake structure up here, up in the corner up here. And it comes down to what we call our Outback facility, which is about 2 miles outside of town on the west.
Those older buildings were built in the 1920s, and that's where you
actually the older buildings are up here.
Up here? Okay.
And then this whole facility was built somewhere around the early 80s. And actually what we call LT1, the first drinking water rule, required this facility to be built.
What is an Outback facility?
Well, it got named that. Not quite sure why they called it Outback, but that's the name that's been stuck with it. But what we have there is a number of storage tanks. We also have a number of wells at this facility that we use. But primarily, this is where we do our chlorine disinfection. And again, that was what was required back in the 80s to actually comply with that first rule. We began to, it wasn't just adding chlorine. We had actually been adding chlorine for some time at that point, but the rule at that time changed how long that chlorine had to mix with the water before somebody could consume it, to give that chlorine contact time enough time for that chlorine to interact with those bugs to actually kill them. And but not remove them, kill them. So you can see here that the groundwater table underneath the community here, it varies in depth. Some of our shallowest wells are around 350 feet. Some of our shallower wells. Those typically are in the southeast part of town and the southern part of town. And our deeper wells are actually on the west and east side of town, anywhere from 800. We have some wells that actually go down to 1,100 feet. So quite deep and quite expensive to lift that water. This is an image just to give a quick idea of how much of the community we can actually feed by gravity. And everything you see in blue there is what we can supply by gravity. The pink is, or reddish area, those areas are the areas that require some amount of pumping. So this is one of those things that, frankly, our fire department they like a lot, because even if we lose power in a very horrible event, right, they still have water pressure to fight fires, and that's a big deal. And one of the things, Dave, that a lot of citizens don't realize, not just here but actually around the United States, is really what water distribution systems, when they were created here throughout the United States, what really drove the development of those was actually the need to put out fires. If you remember some of the awful fires that occurred in Chicago in the 1800s, the San Francisco fires in the early 1900s, really drove the desire, the citizens' desire to make investments in these pressurized water systems, so that there was pressurized water available to fight these fires, and which ended the whole bucket brigades, as you've heard.
Right, so that they wouldn't lose the entire city.
Right, and so today, because we've been so dependent on these pressurized water systems for so many years, most of us have really forgotten that component of water systems. We really think that their sole purpose is there to provide us drinking water, and in fact the entire water system is designed to fight fire. That is first and foremost. The secondary piece of it is to actually provide water for drinking. Of course, that's why we really focus on the high quality portion of it.
Right.
I wanted to get here to an image I have of the treatment. Here we go. So we talked about treatment, and we looked at two different types of treatment. And you can see up in this upper corner up here, it looks a little bit like something out of a science fiction film. And that's called a UV reactor, and UV being ultraviolet. And those are ultraviolet lights that are inside that reactor, and water flows past these light bulbs, ultraviolet light bulbs, and what happens is any bugs, anything like that that goes by them, as long as those bugs get exposed long enough to that light, they get a really bad sunburn, is the best way we can put it. It doesn't remove the bug, but it essentially makes it so that that bug can no longer reproduce. It doesn't even kill it. It just makes it so that bug cannot reproduce.
Would that also effectively treat cryptosporidium?
Correct. So essentially what it would do is it neutralizes that bug. The problem with ultraviolet for us is the fact that if we have a fire, of course, then that turbidity or the amount of the ability for light to penetrate that water column goes down as you mix in soils and ash and those kinds of things. And of course, if these bugs do not get exposed to that light, of course, then you don't end up neutralizing them. So because of the fire threat, we looked at the membrane treatment technology. And the membrane treatment technology, there's various forms, but this particular form is actually considered pressurized membranes. And inside these cylinders, inside each one, are thousands and thousands of strands of this. It's like a plastic-type fiber. And they're very fine. It looks like literally thousands of strands of spaghetti inside each one of these. And what they are is there's micro pores in those strands, and the openings to that are so small that bugs, contaminants can't fit through those holes.
So you actually just screen the bugs out.
And that's exact. So this actually not only removes the bugs, it actually removes any potential other contaminants that could enter the water stream. So it actually serves more as a dual benefit instead of a singular benefit that the UV provided.
If you have like a large catastrophic fire on the watershed, is there a problem with plugging these up because you've got so much ash and stuff coming into the filters?
It's a fantastic question. We looked at that, and it certainly potentially could be. What we found is that we really haven't found a membrane plant that has experienced a catastrophic fire event, but we have worked with places where membrane has experienced serious turbidity events. Mm-hmm. And those filters held up quite well. So what happens is you're right, the more of that material debris that's in the water, it does plug those spaghetti strands essentially quicker. But there's a cleaning process that these go through. And so depending upon how much those plug, the higher the frequency of cleaning.
Okay.
So the downside is the more you clean these, the more you shorten their life.
Okay.
So what we've looked at doing is actually adding what we call pre-treatment, and to remove let what can just settle out by gravity and other mechanical systems, get those particulates to settle out. So what we're not removing as much here, and we get a longer life out of these filters. But in order to save costs, what we did is right now we're looking at just making the structures to deal with that pre-treatment. We're not actually looking at putting in the systems to deal with the pre-treatment. And that would be an investment that we would make after the event of a fire. We have talked to a number of communities that have had watersheds where they have gone up in fire, and we've talked to them about what kind of issues they've experienced, both in short term and long term. And what we found was the first year to 2 years, you have an ash load and you have some sediment load. Usually the initial fire shuts the water down is really the duration of the fire and a little bit longer than that. But then beyond that, as you get rain events and snowmelt events, that's when the real damage occurs, and it really starts eroding earth, and that lasts for a very long time. To give you an idea, the Bridge Creek fire that occurred in 1979, a very small portion of that fire actually went up into our watershed, a very small area of it. The turbidity that we experience today that shuts our water supply system down, our surface water supply, the turbidity that shuts it down comes from that fire in 1979.
And if you can remember that slide, it was just a very small portion of that watershed.
It's a very, very tiny portion of the watershed, and it's quite amazing that that little bit shuts this surface water supply down today because we are unfiltered. It shuts it down anywhere from 60 to 90 days a year.
What time of year does that generally happen?
Typically the fall and the spring. So the fall, we get a lot of material that's coming off the trees, that kind of stuff gets in, and we end up having to shut it down to deal with that. And then in the spring, when we get heavy snowmelt occurring, and especially when we get those big storm events, thunderstorm events that get up there, that also shuts us down for that duration.
How now is this the size of a facility in Bend, or would you have more filters here than this?
Actually, this is fairly close to the size that we would have in Bend. We're talking these racks here that you see, these different racks. The city would need about 5 of these racks.
And we have this picture of 4 of them here, so
correct.
we need another rack.
Yep. And so what 5 racks allows us to do is we can always take one rack completely offline, still provide all the water that we can provide from the surface water supply, and take that rack down, clean it, do maintenance, whatever we need to do, and then bring it back up online and take another one down to do maintenance. Now, these systems are highly automated. In fact, operators can actually run these systems remotely from a laptop computer. So, this is something they can set the cleaning times, they can monitor remotely. There's not a lot of manual labor involved with running these compared to traditional or conventional treatment systems.
Who makes this system? Is there one company that makes this?
Well, this particular one is called PALL, P-A-L-L, Membrane. They're actually out of New York, and they really are the leader in the industry in terms of reliability. They right now probably they have the best product on the market. There are other manufacturers of membrane systems that are different. This particular one pushes the water through those membrane fibers. The other ones actually pull the water through the membrane fibers. So there's pluses and minuses to both. But when we looked at longevity, durability, those kinds of issues, we really found that this was the better product. And we did go out to bid for membrane filtration, and we actually came in about $400,000 under budget when we got the bids on these units.
So this is about $30 million for 5 racks? That's
actually, the biggest component of that cost is actually the structure that contains it and some of the other elements that are associated with it. These actual units themselves are about $6 million. So the majority of the cost is in everything around it and not the filters themselves.
So $6 million per rack?
No, total.
Total, for 5 racks?
For 5 racks,
okay.
Yes.
So these filters, these little spaghetti strands, are actually made out of, what are they made out of?
It's called HDPE, or high density polyethylene. In fact, some milk cartons that you may see that you purchase in the market actually have HDPE stamped on them. It's that type of material, and HDPE comes in a lot of different forms, and there's a lot of other chemistry that goes into different materials of HDPE. But this particular one is a circular fiber. It's hollow in the center. Mm-hmm. And then the exterior wall, of course, is porous. And so that's the stuff where, through these micropores is really where the water comes through these. So you can see these are about 6 feet tall. And so you have, if you imagine about 6,000 spaghetti strands in each one of these tubes, through that entire vertical strand of tube, water's trying to be pushed in through those. And of course water gets in and gets into that center, the hollow part where the clean water is, and that comes up through the center of that tube and then goes out to the system.
So it pushes in from the outside and essentially squirts it up the top, and
correct.
It comes out the center tube and then is collected and is piped off to
us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where are we overall, as we could kind of back up and say, okay, where is the city now? As we looked at some of the minutiae, some of the finer points here, we are in the design stage still, and we're getting ready to turn dirt next year?
Yes. We're like I said, we're actually nearing completion on 60% design. Actually, we anticipate being complete with 60% design later this month, end of October. It might be early November, but right in that time frame. Once we complete that 60% design, our contractor and our design consultant will develop estimates for the remainder of that work, construction estimates. and then the two of them do it independently, and then they both bring what they estimate together and bring those to the city. So it's really a partnership where the three of us then sit down and we reconcile any differences between their numbers, and we look at why there may be a difference between what the contractor is saying it's going to cost versus the designer is going to cost. And we work through that process, and then once we get through that process, and we anticipate that could take anywhere from a month to 2 months, once that's complete, the contractor will develop what they call a GMP, or a guaranteed maximum price, and we will bring that to council at probably sometime in January. And when we bring that forward to council, it'll set what we anticipate to be the guaranteed maximum price of the overall project. And if council approves that contract, then we will immediately go into final design and hopefully be wrapping up. Well, we'll have the final design for the pipeline. That will be done sometime in April. The final design for the treatment plant and hydro facility will be completed sometime late summer of 2012. So the idea is that we can begin construction on the pipeline in early summer, and by late summer we're in construction on the other elements of the project.
What would you say to the critics who say we simply can't afford this right now, we need to put it off, we're in the worst economic climate since the Great Depression, some people are calling it the Great Recession right now.
Yeah.
Businesses, are struggling, we've got lots of people losing their homes, and people simply can't afford the price tag?
I think that's a fair concern, and it's something we haven't shied away from. We've brought that forward to council. Council has seriously considered it. It's something council's been very concerned about. They've raised it a number of times, the concern of the cost of this project. But when they looked at all of the elements and all the various factors of this, the council agreed that, despite this being a challenge for us during these economic times, they also recognized the benefit, not just in terms of water supply to our community, but also in terms of jobs. This does create construction jobs, and as you know, our community, the sector that was hardest hit is construction. And this creates a significant number of jobs for construction for a period of about 2 years.
About 200 jobs, was it?
Approximately 200 jobs. So there is a benefit in the short term. Long term, there's an additional benefit in the fact that you actually now have a reliable supply for future economic development and growth. So there definitely it's hard price tag to swallow. One of the things that I remind people is, one, we are facing some deadline issues, and like I talked about, the LT2 rule the LT2 rule that is a deadline we do have to deal with. We can't ignore that deadline. So that's one of the drivers. Also, why now? That's one of them. But I wouldn't say that's the primary, actually. And actually, our council, us as staff, we're actually working with the EPA to even see if we could still get further continuation on that. We don't know what the likelihood of that is, but recently there might be some hope to maybe put that off even a little longer. The other big driver here is the reconstruction of Skyliner Road. And federal funding has been set aside for that reconstruction. The county has made that reconstruction a priority. It's a heavily used corridor for tourists. It's a heavily used corridor for cycling traffic.
Which is a huge issue in Central Oregon, the Bend area.
It really is. So we really would like to take advantage of that opportunity to get the pipe underneath that road before they reconstruct it. Coming in afterwards, not only it's not good use of taxpayer money to rip up something that we've just invested in. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, in terms of timing. It just doesn't seem like very good coordination if we were to do that afterwards. So those are the drivers that are pushing us forward with this now.
Now, I'm sure on the city's website you have this presentation or documentation people can review.
Yeah, we have an overwhelming amount of information on the city's website. There's a lot of information there. All of our studies are there. A lot of the information is very, very technical, but it is there for review. We have had a number of engineering firms involved that have looked at this, that have scrutinized this to determine are we really taking the correct approach. And with all of the review we've had, the response we've gotten is yes. From the professionals in the industry, they've all come back and said the city's taking the correct approach here in terms of the treatment that we've chosen, in terms of sticking with the reinvestment of the surface water supply. They've all come to that same conclusion.
Okay. We just got an email here from Andrew Whalen from Congressman Greg Walden's office. I do want to remind you that noon Monday at the Sun River Resort, Congressman Walden has been invited to deliver the keynote address at the annual meeting of the Oregon Forest Industries Council. We were talking about jobs just now. He's going to deliver an update on the long-term solution to county payments. Now, the city's not really involved in the county payments issue. That would be Deschutes County.
It is Deschutes County, but I believe the city has some vested interest in that, because it does affect our local economics.
By putting Oregonians back to work in the woods, Congressman Walden and others have long been talking about forest health, and we were talking also about the pine-killed timber at the Bridge Creek watershed. And Congressman Walden very concerned about that as far as we need to improve the forest health. Some people believe it's a catastrophic fire waiting to happen because you've got all this dead timber.
Yeah, actually, Congressman Walden's been a big supporter of really doing a lot of cleanup work and forest management. And actually, there was a grant that's been awarded to deal. It's called the DRINK program, and that is to go in and not only in our watershed but all of the surrounding area to deal with that standing dead timber, to get better forest health throughout that area. One of the other components too, Dave, that it helps with that program, if we end up completing this project with the treatment, there will be forest management available to the Forest Service that they don't have today. If you remember, I mentioned the roadless area in there, and we are an unfiltered source. Their ability to bring equipment in, because we're unfiltered, is minimal. They can't cause disturbance. They can't have any fuels in there or anything like that that could potentially contaminate that water. So once we put in treatment, that actually opens up a lot of opportunity for them to come in and do some forest management and health.
To improve the health of the watershed itself.
Yes.
And Congressman Walden will also talk about the House of Representatives' efforts to help spur private sector job creation. Now, this event is going to be noon this Monday at the Sun River Resort in Sun River. We'd like to be able to do this live. I don't know technically whether we'll be able to pull a live feed from there, but we will be there and we'll record it, his address in its entirety, and put it up on our website and put it up on YouTube and our websites. Again, our websites are www.evmmedia.tv. We're going to add another one here in just a minute. We'll tell you later today what that site's going to be. www.tjn1.tv and eagle1.tv. That'd be www.eagle1.tv. Now, TJN is the Jesus Network, Christian News Network we have. Operation Eagle's Wings is where we look at veterans issues and some of the serious issues affecting veterans. And then the Pulse. The Pulse is something that we've just started here. We go into community like Bend. We're going to be doing a lot of Bend stories because we're based in Bend, but we're also going to be going to Salem, Portland, Astoria, Coos Bay, Ontario, Burns, Lakeview, Hines, all over we're going to first go around Oregon, and we're going to go around Oregon on a regular basis, talk to chambers of commerce, city councils, businesses, part of the show that we're doing, we're going to bring in business leaders of those communities and talk about the issues affecting specific cities. But one of the things we're excited about the network is that we can go to an event like this and we can provide long-form coverage of things like this address with Congressman Walden without any time constraints. And that's the beauty of one of the things doing TV on the internet allows us to do, is we're not backed up by we have 30 seconds to tell you a story, that we can do it as long as we need to. And so that's kind of the mission of our networks here, is to get the information out to you and provide it to you in a way that you can digest it at your leisure. You can go to our website and watch the show either live, or you can watch it on a tape delay basis. So Tom, I'm sure we'll be visiting again as this project develops.
Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I guess I would encourage citizens to go to the city's website, read the material if they have questions. Obviously council has been listening. They have made a decision on this, but they still, are talking to the community to help get the community to understand why this investment is needed, why now, those kinds of questions. We certainly understand, and we'd encourage people to call and ask.
Okay, and the news content that you hear will be provided also to Combined Communications, which is KBND Radio. We have a partnership with them now, and so this interview will be given to them, and they will be using it, I assume, in some of their newscasts. So, Tom, thank you very much for being with us today. Look forward to having you again, and other members of the city and city council at some point. And we will be out and about. We will be in Sun River Monday at noon, and just watch our website for the schedule of shows that we have to come. We're booking shows all the time. The show is Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. Again, the schedule, 7 to 7:30 is TJN, or the Jesus Network, from 7 to 7:30 Pacific. From 7:30 to 8 is Eagle TV, and that's where we take a look at the issues affecting veterans. And then from 8 to 8:30 Pacific time is The Pulse. And The Pulse is, in fact, we went a little bit longer than we scheduled. That's fine. We can do that on the internet. The Pulse is where we go into an area and look at issues of general concern to the city. From 8:30 to 9 Pacific time, our plan is, as we go into cities, and we'll be talking to a number of business leaders here in Bend, to bring them on the air and talk about issues affecting the city. What's affecting their businesses? What are the challenges? How can state, local governments, federal government help? And what are some of the possibilities? We want to talk about, not everything is gloom and doom.
Yeah.
There's some, one of the things that comes to mind is some of the biggest corporations that are in business today were started during serious economic crises. The Great Depression birthed a lot of millionaires and a lot of the big companies. And a lot of companies started in garages. HP started in a garage in Boise, Idaho, I think.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and it's grown to what it is today. So, and also what happens is as people lose jobs, on the bright side of that, if there is one, is that they have a chance to sit back and say, okay, I've always wanted to do this project, and it's an opportunity to do that. So I think you're going to see creativity abound, and people have some time to really explore their dreams, and you're going to see a lot of interesting things happen. So we want to kind of share those stories with you as we find them. So if you know of a story that you'd like us to cover, you can send me an email. Have several email addresses. Go to the websites I've mentioned, but I'll give you a real short one. It's Dave, D-A-V-E, at EVM, Echo Victor Mary, EVM1.info. And just go to our website. Tom, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Dave.
And look forward to having you back. And you have a great day, and we will catch you. We'll be out and about, but we'll be here Monday morning at 7 a.m. with another show, and we will be in Sun River at noon, and probably bring you that on a tape delay basis as soon as we can get back to the studios from Sun River. So you have a great day. Have a great weekend.